Great. Good evening. This is the Wednesday, April 3rd meeting of the Finance Committee. We're a couple minutes ahead of schedule here, but I think that's a good thing sometimes. Our agenda tonight, call to order just before 7. There are no transfers this evening. We're reviewing 3 budgets, and we're actually going to take them in this order, which would be Emergency Management, the Fire Department, and then the Police Department. Then we'll adjourn. Next week, April 10th, we'll be looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 budgets, the law, Bay Path Solid Waste Youth Commission, and pension and benefits. So without further ado, can I have Roger Bellamont? Roger. This is regarding the emergency management budget. Roger, I've been asking the department heads just to give a quick overview. I know you have I'll call it a simple budget. It's important on what you do. If you could give us just a little brief overview of how this year went and future needs that may or may not be addressed in your budget.
Okay. Well, we had a very good year this year. We had twice that we had to activate the EOC. We were able to get a grant this year, and we have a trailer that we're working on to turn into a mobile EOC in conjunction with the police, fire, and we also brought in the local cable people. So that this trailer, instead of just sitting there waiting for an emergency to happen, or a disaster to happen, the local cable TV people will be able to use it, go to sites within town, and actually broadcast right from that trailer. And from talking to them, it looks like they're probably, with the fiber optics that we have and some equipment on it, they'll be able to do a lot of live things. So, it won't be just sitting there waiting for a tornado or a hurricane. This year in the budget, the biggest thing that we had was the generator maintenance. As a matter of fact, it's at 0 right now. Hopefully we won't have anything go wrong between now and the end of the year here. So we only got a couple months to have to worry about. And that was because of a couple of large items that we had to repair. Randall School generator, took about $1,400 to repair that and get that thing up and running. The police departments, we just helped her pay. In fact, we didn't even have enough to completely pay it, but Eileen was able to find some in her budget to take the balance, so that was another $600 to get theirs up and running and in good shape. So other than that, the budget is small. We don't need much. Again, the generator maintenance is probably the biggest thing that I have on there. And I upped the maintenance shelter and the equipment only to work on that trailer so we can get that up and running. Just a few $100, so it's not like a lot of money that we can throw into that and get that thing going. So,
Good.
about it.
Hopefully, we won't need it for any real uses, if you know what I mean.
Well, we hope not, but I was pleasantly surprised because I've been away for 10 years, and when I came in to see what we have for an EOC and see what they've done next door in the planning room, it's phenomenal. It's pretty nice, pretty good.
So we got a lot done while you were gone.
Yeah, we've got some good people. You have some good people
definitely.
working in the town now.
Yep.
Real good people.
Yep, good investment, very good investment. I'll open this up to any questions before we even talk to the motion at all. Chris?
Chief, what are your long-term plans for emergency management?
Well, with $10,000, you can't do much of anything, but
I know.
our biggest thing is we're getting the search program up and running. We're getting this trailer up and running. There's a few things that we want to finish up in the EOC. And training, we'll get some training done. I don't know really what else at this point, except that make sure that we're prepared. That's the biggest thing. Yeah, I said that, the search, the CERT program, that's something. We just got some materials for training to help him out. Tony Pellegrino heads that up and does a wonderful job with the CERTS program. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Jim?
Through the chair, this maintenance budget for the generator, how many generators are there that this encompasses?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
24.
Overall life expectancies for some of these generators, are we running into age problems with some of them, or?
I'd say the biggest concern is the West Street generator. That is, that generator is over 50 years old. We had, and unfortunately, that's the same generator that runs the fire station. It's down more than it's up, but I think, so at some point, we're gonna have to look at what the future of that building is and what we're gonna do in terms of long term for the generator replacement. The other generators, Town Hall is brand new. Most of these generators are under, 20 years old, or coming up on 20 years old. And, as long as you have the preventative maintenance on them, like we're doing, you'll get 50 years out of them. So I'd say West Street is the biggest priority, definitely the oldest.
And West Street, 10 years ago when I was here, we were spending a lot of money on it then. And obviously, they still are, We've gotten a lot more generators since I left, but if they're all, like the chief said, you can get 50 years if they're maintained. And they have a good program prior to me coming. They had a good program put in place to maintain them, so.
The last two storms, I ended up having to rent a generator for Station 2 because the West Street generator was out of service. So I wound up, between the two storms, I probably spent close to $1,000 in generator rental just to power the station.
Now, generators, they usually rebuild or replace? Replace. I guess the question, when we talk about West Street, and I know it's all a big if it's about, obviously, they're probably gonna need a generator for a new school. Is there any thoughts about combining the two buildings into one generator? I don't know if it's gotten to that specific of.
Yeah, I think, well, some of the challenges that you're going to have there is the school is actually going to be quite a distance there. And the other thing that you have to remember is even when you have the generator like the one at the high school, it doesn't actually power the entire building. It only powers core services and things like that.
I'm just wondering, at some point, does it get to a point where it just.
Right. And one of the challenges that we have at the West Street location and the fire station is that has come from the school side. So we actually don't have our own electrical service. We don't have, unfortunately, the generator being on the school side, when that goes out, it affects us. But to even turn around and say, well, the fire department would invest in a capital purchase to put a generator in, we're still tapping off the electrical side of the school because we don't have any of our own services. So, you have the question to ask, how much do you 60 years old?
Right.
Just wonder if some of those things come into play when we're talking about repair.
Good question. Kim, you had?
Replacing the generator out there.
The generator that we did at Town Hall, which is bigger than the one that's at the fire station, we have a 20 kW at the fire station, I believe is a kW, and that was about a $60,000 installation. The 20 kW, you're in the 20 to 30 range for a replacement.
It's a number, no doubt about it. Any other questions? I had one question. This is a little bit in the details of the budget. It's either to Roger or to Ed on this. Fiscal 13 appropriation, we had 2,000 budgeted for overtime, prior use of that overtime account. Where does that stand right now, and where we're technically budgeting behind or below the 3-year average in the generator maintenance? Would it make sense to move some of those monies that were budgeted for overtime, move them down to generator maintenance, say move $1,000?
Through the chair, year-to-date, we've spent about 65% of the $2,000 that has been appropriated, roughly $1,300. That overtime is specifically used for maintaining those generators in-house. Before, we used to outsource that at a cost in excess of $6,000.
$6,000.
Very expensive. So by bringing it in-house, we've been able to save thousands of dollars. So those are maintained periodically throughout the year, maybe on a quarterly basis.
Each generator is on a cycle, so there's monthly work being done on various generators.
So we fully expect to expend the full $2,000.
Okay, and that money is being used on the generators. I wasn't
Yes.
too sure of the use of that overtime funds. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, we've got a budget recommended by the town manager and concurred with the department head of $10,000 for fiscal 14. This is a $500 increase over the fiscal 13 budget. Do we have a motion?
Second.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Roger, nice to see you. Thank you.
See you people. Thank you.
And if the finance committee doesn't object, the chief is under a time crunch, I'm not, so if you don't mind.
Oh, okay. Chief Coleman is deferring the microphone, I guess, to Chief Slukas. Let's fire away at the police department. Chief, nice to see you. Thanks for coming up.
Same here.
And I'll make a comment, by the way, since you guys are all up here, I'm hearing, I think, fire engines down there, police horns back here. You guys are here, we understand, and you know, what's going on around. Once again, Chief, highlights of your budget, and certainly things that you'd like to see in here that didn't quite make it at this early pass, not so early anymore, for the budget, please.
As far as the budget goes, we're pretty much on track as to where we would anticipate being at this time, pretty much every year. Overtime is an issue. Personnel is an issue. Personnel was probably the one thing that we would maybe like to see change should there be any additional monies coming from the state down the road, but, you know, I understand we'll have to wait and see how things go. As you see, our budget, it really hasn't increased that much. I think we're looking at something like 1/10 of 1% of an increase is the way things stand now. The issue with overtime is probably the standard issue that it is at each time during the budgetary cycle. I would anticipate coming in for a transfer at some point in time. As you know, we're budgeted for $200,000, and we typically spend around between injured on duty reimbursements from the insurance company, grants and transfers. We probably spend somewhere in the area, like, I think the last 2 years was $305,000 and maybe $308,000 respectively. So $200,000, it's the base upon which we build in and take the injuries as they come, and the IOD status as it comes.
In terms of, like to have not in here, anything specific?
No, just personnel. We still have vacancies that we've had. I was able to fill one vacancy. I have right now 2 patrol vacancies that are unfunded, 1 sergeant vacancy that is unfunded. I have 1 patrol vacancy that is not filled but funded. And I, just a couple of months ago, was able to hire one patrolman, Officer Greg Wildman. He was a detective sergeant out in Ashland. He was looking for another department. He wasn't happy with the way things were going out there. He came in and we met, and he liked the department, he liked the town, and eventually gave up being a detective sergeant working days to go back to be a patrolman on the 11 to 7 shift.
Good. Good. And if I could, I don't know that I'm interrupting you on this. Ed and I had just a quick discussion just to confirm. Back, I think it was 10 years ago or so, when we had override questions, I believe the police, amongst some other school department, fire department, received additional monies added to their operating budget. And I know I've been asked several times, well, what happened with those patrolmen that was supposed to be added? There was a very solid list from both fire department, police department, et cetera. I had a brief conversation with Ed just to confirm that it was right around that time that the state was no longer supporting the Quinn bill. And Ed, if you can help me out on here, I believe the town, and I think it was Wright, took over those Quinn obligations to the police, and that really chewed up what was really the override dollars, so we were able to maintain the department. Is that pretty much how that rolled out? Over
Yeah, I
2 year
think at the
period?
time there was some positions, I think the override provided 6 new positions, 5 patrol, 1 sergeant. During that period, certainly it takes time to fill those positions. There are civil service test requirements and the waiting list, and it just took some time. But during that same period, we realized about a $160,000 to $180,000 reduction in Quinn, and basically put those positions on hold, and it forced us to divert some of the tax levy dollars to support what they currently had, just to maintain that current level of service, because we lost those state dollars. As you know, it actually went down to 10%, then down to 5%, and ultimately down to 0, and haven't seen a dime since. So as a result of that, we had to scale back on those positions with the intent, when things turned around, we would hopefully like to restore those positions to the point where the voters said they wanted a higher level of support, and voted that override vote.
Now, we did add a couple of positions right along the way. Chief, we have actually added bodies since then. I'm talking on a net basis here. The only reason why I'm asking and continuing to talk, so you can't answer me, is the town is up to now taking over $250,000 in Quinn obligations all in. So what I'm trying to underline here is I think we've added some positions, but the town has also taken on what is now about $250,000 or more of Quinn obligations that the state had originally had 10, 12 years ago. Is that about right?
Yes, that is right.
Okay. I'm going to open this up to questions. I'm talking too much right now. Kim?
Eddie, can you tell me how many of those 6 positions we currently have funded and filled?
3. And I don't want to say filled. There are 3 of them, actually, out of the 6, they lost 3. So they have 3 funded, 3 were removed. All right. Out of the 3, there's 1 vacant position. Currently a vacant patrolman's position.
Funded?
Funded but vacant.
So you've got 1 funded vacant position in your budget right now.
Yes.
Is there a reason why that's not filled?
To be perfectly blunt with you, I haven't been able to find anyone that I'm willing to hire. I've interviewed several people that have applied for lateral transfers that work at other departments, but I don't want to hire somebody just to hire a body. Whoever I hire, once they're in the civil service system, first of all, when you take a lateral transfer, there's no probationary period, so when I hire them, we collectively own them. And, you know, I can't hire somebody that's working as a patrolman in another community that's on the verge of bankruptcy. I'd like to, but it makes it too problematic to live with somebody for potentially the next 25, 30 years that could potentially be a problem employee. I would rather wait until I find someone that, like this detective sergeant that I was just speaking about, he's a great fit. You know, he comes to the department with a master's degree in criminal justice and a master's degree in psychology. That's somebody that I want to hire. But, you know, somebody just to say I filled a position is not the route I really want to travel.
So, can I
Sure, absolutely.
keep going?
Absolutely.
So if I heard what you told Kevin right, your wish list would be for the 2 unfunded vacant patrol positions and a sergeant position?
That would be true. In our preliminary budget discussions, I was talking with Eddie, and I'm kicking around the idea of making a sergeant now because I have the money in my budget, and maybe going back in the fall to address any backfilling issues that may arise at town meeting. But I've got, as I said, I have 2 officers that are out injured on duty. The person that I would promote currently is in the Detective Bureau now, so I've got to look and see logistically how it would work out, because if he comes out and gets promoted to sergeant, now that means I've got to take somebody from patrol, put them into the Detective Bureau, and with 2 officers out injured, I really have to analyze what the impact is going to be.
No.
But I am thinking about doing
But
that.
if there were funds if the finance committee or the town meeting were to recommend, what is it that you are actually looking for?
It would be personnel, yes. It would be filling the vacant positions.
Filling the, so if you had 3 vacant patrol positions, obviously the sergeant is a promotion, so you take one of your existing patrolmen
Yep.
and through the civil service process, promote. So that's not the same issue with hiring.
Correct.
That you have with a patrol position.
Exactly.
If you had 3 vacant patrol positions, would it be easier to fill the 3 than it is the 1? Because would you send them to class, or would you try to do laterals?
Well, ultimately, I guess if I could do laterals, that would be preferable. But if I had to hire a certain number, whether it be 1, 2, or 3 that I was going to send to the academy, it would be better to hire 3, because the more names that you
Can get
get, right, I'd have more people to choose from. If I
Right.
call civil service and say, send me a list, I'm hiring 1 person, they'd send me 3 names. If I say I'm hiring 3 people, well, then I probably get, depending on if there's ties, 12 or 15 names to choose from. So if I was going to go that route, more would certainly be better.
It's a good question.
Thank you, Chief. Eddie, when we got our budget packages back in January or February, one of the pieces of paper was the department priorities that have not been met in our current budget recommendations. And number 1 on that list was the positions that the chief is asking of all the requests. That was number 1 by the administration. Do we have any idea where we stand with state aid or anything that is there anything we can do?
Well, what I do know is what I heard in the last couple of days relative to Speaker DeLeo's comments and Senator Murray's comments on the governor's proposed budget. Both House and Senate is not going to support an income tax rate hike. They are taking a no new tax pledge. They are supporting an increase of $500 million for primarily transportation, raised through a 3-cent per gallon tax on fuel, as well as some technology taxation. I don't know quite how that works. As a result of that, I don't know what that means in terms of state aid. I really don't. They're not hinting. It's too early. It's too early to say or even to project what they may come out with. I was made to believe that the numbers are going to come out on or about April 11th, so I think we're about a week away. I would suggest that we at least wait until those numbers are released, just to give us a comparison to what the governor has proposed. But it sounds like they may be on opposite ends of the spectrum. I don't know how they can commit a large increase in state aid if there's no increase in revenue, especially given that revenues are lagging in the current fiscal year.
And once again, we're going to be stuck with timing issue, and that's just how the May town meeting works. I mean, our real budget that I think satisfies a lot of department heads, or at least takes care of some of our major wish list stuff, doesn't happen until fall town meeting when we have a real good idea of the budget. The nice thing is when those numbers come in, we actually have a few months to sit down and really reassess what our needs are when we know what we have for dollars available to spend.
Mr. Chairman, one other comment. In terms of the staffing issue, the chief has raised filling a sergeant's position, or his current patrol is a sergeant's position. And operationally, I think he believes that's the right thing to do, and we'll fully support him on that. He does have the money available in the current year's budget. Next year's budget, we could always consider either a supplemental appropriation of fall town meeting or a delayed hiring of the patrolman's position to make it work. We've had discussions about that. That's something he's exploring right now, but just want to let him know we would support his his recommendation on that.
Chris, and then Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, just a couple of questions. On the motor vehicle line repair, is that the reduction, obviously it's zeroed out, is that an actual savings? Or we just move the money from one line item to another line?
Yeah, you'll notice that there's two different accounts that have been zeroed out. One is maintenance, 511219, and the other is motor vehicle repair, under the 212 line item that you're referring to, 5241. That money is gone over to the DPW because they've taken over maintenance of our building, the cleaning and upkeep of that, as well as the repair of our fleet. So it just made sense to give that money to them, seeing they're buying all of the automotive parts that we're going to be using.
I guess I'm not really familiar with the process. What's the difference between a civil service and a non-civil service person when you go to hire someone? I know there's such a thing as a non-civil service town. Again, I'm not familiar with the process, so. Can you
Well,
hire someone who's non-civil service
That's non-civil service. You're really not bound by any structure. You can give any type of an exam that you want. You can establish the list of who you want to hire pretty much any way you want. Under Chapter 31, under civil service, there are specific rules and regulations, testing criteria, a specific reading list, a specific exam, a specific fee that you have to pay to take the exam. And then there are specific guidelines in which you have to operate under when it comes time to hire someone. If you bypass someone and you don't go in order of that list, you have to have what they refer to as sound and sufficient reason for bypassing that person. That person has the ability to file an appeal. I'll use an example of one person that was an Auburn resident that took the exam, appeared on the list. We did his background investigation, and during that investigation, he admitted that he had filed bankruptcy twice and was a recreational cocaine user. Well, we bypassed him and said, we're not going to hire you. He appealed to civil service. So we had to go to Boston with town council, and there was a hearing before an administrative law judge, and the judge heard all the facts in the case and took the matter under advisement, and at the end of the day, we prevailed, and they said that we had sound and sufficient reason not to hire him. If you're not operating under civil service, none of that happens. You could just say, we're not hiring you because we don't want to.
All right, I just wondered what the benefit was to hiring someone from a non-civil service town, but thank you.
Yep, sure.
Jim?
Well, every year I always ask the same question. I guess I'll stay with this. I've always had a problem with the Quinn bill. It's no surprise. I ask this question every year. One of these state programs they fund for a little while, they get everybody to buy into, and then they pull the rug out from under all the cities and towns and say, okay, you're on your own.
They did.
Frankly, it's not even a Quinn bill anymore. We use their structure, but they don't contribute anything.
That's true. That's correct.
Something that's unto the town taxpayers to make up that difference. And believe me, I want to make it clear, I'm not stating that this money should be taken away, but as negotiations go for contracts in years to come, are we going to try and do away with this? And, there's a way, I see cities and towns that are doing it where they come up with their own continuing education, stipends for expanded education for police officers. Is there something in the works with town administration to kind of get rid of this line item in negotiations, new negotiations with patrolmen, the chief, and...
I can tell you the way that it works now, if I hire someone, they have to either be getting the Quinn bill or they have to have been enrolled in an accredited program, whatever the date was, about 2 years ago. That was the cutoff date. That's if I take a lateral transfer. If I hire someone that is not currently receiving the Quinn bill that goes to the police academy, they're not eligible. I actually had this conversation with Lieutenant Harrigan today, and we said probably in about a span of 8 to maybe 10 years, almost the entire existing command staff of the police department here will be gone. It'll be an entirely new command staff. And along with that, the majority of the Quinn bill will also disappear.
I'm very happy to hear that, because I've just had a problem with this whole thing. And I've been on the finance committee, I don't know, 10 years now, and I ask this question every single year, and it seems like the state contributes less and less, and now they're at zero now, which is just wonderful.
Giant goose egg.
Yeah, which is just
They're at
wonderful,
zero.
because like I said, all these cities and towns bought into this, and now we have absolutely nothing to show for it except the taxpayers having to foot the bill. And I do encourage continued education. I'm not saying that for 1 second, but I just think at some point we've got to get away from these state programs that are just not programs anymore. It's something that they modeled and walked completely away from.
Well, for whatever it's worth, we are just at the very, very beginning of contract negotiations. Everyone's contracts expire this July. So we're looking at a bunch of different proposals that we'll put on the table and see what comes out in the wash.
And I also had one last question. When it comes to like distributing overtime and detail work, is there actually a breakdown by person, what they actually make salary-wise, and then detail work, overtime?
Sure.
I know it's not in our schedule. I know that it just happens, the city of Worcester comes out with their little list of people, the top pay earners in the city, and it's pretty a telling little feature when you see, all the detail work, and you see some people making 2-3 times their salary in detail work. I know that's not the case here, but I'm just kind of curious if there's ever any list available through the town. It should be public knowledge, I guess.
I don't know if that would break down in Munis, if you could.
Yeah, that's something we could run, and we've received a number of public records requests where we provided that.
Okay, just kind of curious. Thank you.
Fair question. Kim?
I'm probably the only one up here who's been around long enough to remember, but when the Quinn bill was an option, it was a acceptance of a chapter of the general laws. It was the town meeting that voted to accept it against the recommendation of the Finance Committee back in the 80s. Because I happened to be in Sharon's position back then. The Finance Committee didn't recommend acceptance, and the town meeting voted it anyway.
It's good to know. I can't believe you're that old. 30, 35? Come on,
It is,
that's
yeah.
crazy.
Sad but true.
That's not right. You must have been
Sad but
working
true.
here as a teenager
80s,
or
I was
something.
young. I was
You know, you were
barely out of
a
diapers.
teenager. There we go.
Barely.
There we go.
Right on your application.
There we go. Okay, I think we just digressed, and let's get a hold of this meeting. Ann, any questions?
No, my only questions were Quinn, and Jim already asked them.
Okay. I usually, you know what? I'm going to ask again, because we've got a fairly flat budget here. My first question is in jest, my second one isn't. And I know I've asked Lieutenant Harrigan, who's here, do you have enough money for bullets? I've asked it before.
Well, the short answer is yes. The difficult part of that is actually trying to obtain them.
I'm not going there. It was half in jest.
Have money.
I think you knew where I was going with that, so thank you for both answers. My second question is regarding the desk clerks line, which ramped up considerably over the last several years. Is that number stabilizing now? It's up just over 400 grand, where just a few years ago it was at 350.
Yeah, that's contractual obligations, and the part-time dispatchers are built into that as well, to
Okay.
help try and alleviate overtime in dispatch, which, as you know, we run 2 dispatches 24/7, so every time somebody takes a day off, vacation day, personal day, or is out
Right.
sick, it reverts generally to overtime if we can't get one of the part-time people
Yeah.
and to be honest with you, it's very difficult to retain part-time people in that position.
I'm sure there's some stress involved with that, but we expect that number to start stabilizing anyways,
Yes.
in
Yep.
terms of at least salaried up for the number of hours, which is 24/7. Okay, that's great. And one more note before we get to taking a vote on the budget, at least from what I'm seeing, compared to your fiscal 13 appropriation, if I'm correct, the one item that has changed and moved over to the maintenance group is you had a $35,000 budget for motor vehicle repair. That's the only change from last year's budget.
Yep.
Because when we talk about your budget now, I'm going to compare that to last year's budget,
Yes,
just so we're all clear on that.
yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions? Okay, we've got a town manager recommended budget of $3,710,568. This is a 0.11% increase over fiscal 13, or $4,122. And once again, 35,000 of your budget has been moved over, so the number's around a 1% increase if that were factored back in, just for argument's sake. I really don't want anyone out there thinking we totally flat-funded the police budget. Definitely not our intention.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thanks, Chief. So what's the recommendation of the Finance Committee?
Motion to recommend?
Any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted.
Thank you
Chief,
all
thanks for
very
your
much.
time.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Lieutenant, nice to see you, too. Thanks for coming.
Mr. Chairman, before the chief leaves, I just want the Finance Committee to know that his original request, and I don't know if you saw the first budget that he presented, actually reflected the 3 positions that he had discussed during the budget deliberations. So his original request, his budget was bumping up against $4 million. So that $278,000, we ask any costs associated with those 3 positions to be revisited and to submit a budget minus those 3 positions. That's why the priority for that value has been identified on that supplemental sheet when we originally submitted the budget.
Okay. So that 278 would represent 3 positions,
All costs associated with the 3 positions.
including benefits?
When contractual obligations for physical fitness bonus, to equip the new positions as well. And the same is true for the fire department as well. You'll see those costs that we weren't able to recommend at this point in time, but it is on the list of priorities.
Okay. Thanks, Ed. Chief, thanks again. Nice to see you. Okay, our last budget is the fire department budget. Chief Coleman's here, along with, I'll say, most of his staff. Good to see all of you guys. Thank you for coming out. Chief, just as I did with Chief Slukas and former Chief Bellimer, is if you could, I'll say, start your show with just a few of your highlights and what you've accomplished and would like to accomplish in the next budget year.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2012 was again once a very busy year for the fire department. We finished 2012 holding our ranking outside the city of Worcester as the busiest fire department in southern Worcester County and the 6th busiest overall in Worcester County. So there's a lot of good things, a lot of activity going on in the department that we're all very proud of, and that's why my command staff is here this evening to share it with you. Over the last year, including the budget, and we'll talk about it as we move through, we've essentially looked at every element of our operation over the last year in terms of how we do business, whether it's the EMS division, fleet maintenance, building maintenance, special operations, anything that we do. And, we essentially stripped it and rebuilt it. And you'll see some of those savings in here this evening, and then you'll see some new programs that we're looking at as well. But the department is in good shape because of that rebuild. In terms of the highlights of some things that weren't able to be addressed, really the 2 priority things that I have in here, I'd draw your attention to the overtime line. My original request was for $250,000, a little over $250,000. The line has been level funded, so essentially $126,316 was pulled from the budget. The reason for that overtime request is, if you recall last year when I stood before you during the budget hearing, I stress the importance and my desire to at some point staff the fire engine with 3 people. That is my priority. It is a safety issue. It's one of the largest safety issues that I face in the department. Again, like I said earlier, we're a busy organization. There's a lot going on. You know, we average 3,000 calls a year. We're doing over 1,000 code enforcement and fire inspection activities. There's a lot going on day to day. To have the current minimum staffing at 6 essentially puts 4 people assigned to the 2 staffed paramedic level ambulances we have, and then that leaves 2 people left behind to operate the fire engine. If we had that 3rd person to put the minimum at 7, there's a whole bunch of different options that we could do, whether that's a supervisor in a car to maintain 3 people out at West Street, 3 people on the engine. The day is so dynamic and fluid that I know it doesn't sound like a lot, and I said this to you last year. I know that 1 body does not sound like a lot. But when you're dealing in emergency services and you're dealing in what we're doing, 1 body is huge in terms of whether or not we can put an Auburn responder on a call or not, in terms of if we have mutual aid requests. One of the statistics that we ran this year, Captain Johnson, who's my administrative captain who handles scheduling and anything essentially number related. One of the statistics that we ran this year that we thought were quite interesting was our simultaneous call activity. It's one of those things that, kind of sitting around talking, we always say, and Mrs. Holstrom has had the luxury of having a scanner in her home for many years. I know you're probably glad that you're able to turn it off now, but we all sit around and we say, geez, the amount of back-to-back calls and simultaneous calls that we get in this community is staggering. And we actually ran the statistics this year, and 1/4 of our call volume is what we would consider simultaneous calls, meaning that when 1 call comes in, our 3-year average has been 650 simultaneous calls a year. So it's a little under 1/4 of our call volume, but that means when we get called to 1 call, within a half an hour time frame, a 2nd or a 3rd call is coming in. So we have days where we are in 2 or 3 different locations. There's some days, to be honest with you, that we're in 5 or 6 locations. We have 2 mutual aid companies in at separate places. So that 1 body is the difference as to whether or not we can get to some of our simultaneous, call activity. So by far, raising our minimum staffing from 6 to 7 is my priority. Now, let me explain the 126 in overtime. This is, in my opinion, a creative way to make that happen, short of going out and hiring 4 additional firefighters at a little over $300,000. 40% of the time in the course of a year, we're running at 6 people. Okay? We typically run 8 full-time a day. Due to paid time off, sick time, whatever it is, we're allowed to drop by 2 without filling overtime, which drops us to 6. That happens 40% of the time over the course of a year. The $126,000 represents what we would need in overtime to backfill with overtime that 40% to keep the minimum at 7 instead of 6. So for less than half the cost of hiring additional staff, I consider it to be a creative way to reach our minimum manning staffing without taking on the burden of additional personnel and fringe and things like that. So, in my opinion, I think this is doable. I think it's a short-term solution. At some point, we're going to have to look at it. But I think where it's if it was 80% of the time that we were running at 6, I would stand before you and say this is not a feasible option. I don't know how I'm possibly going to fill overtime 80% of the time. Where it's 40% of the time. And the way that I will have this overtime structured, it will be, what we'll call engine-only overtime. So when you take this, overtime, you would be assigned as the 3rd person on the fire truck. Within our business, that makes it more attractive overtime as well. So in my opinion, our success rate to fill this overtime is going to be very high, and this would be a way that we can get from 6 to 7. So if funds were to become available, that is my priority within this budget. Getting to 7 is critical. The other area that you will see that was not carried over was in the dues and meetings, 5732-00, dues and meetings. My original request was for $6,500. The The manager's budget has it level funded at $3,500. That additional $3,000 was to support the special operations divisions within the department, which we have regionalized within the last couple of years. We have, 3 years ago, we regionalized our dive team effort. The town of Auburn had a long-standing dive team, public safety dive team, over 2 decades. A couple of years ago, 5 years ago, there was a need to overhaul that. A lot of people retired, a lot of people left, and we were left without a dive team. So we regionalized with the towns of Oxford, Charlton, Southbridge, Sturbridge, and Dudley, and then including Auburn, there's a 6-town regional effort. Again, that was done 3 years ago. The problem is we sort of entered into that venture with no real budget. We sort of got creative. We worked within our operating budgets to build the team. 3 years later, we have a strong, healthy team. But the reality is that it is going to cost some money, in order to maintain that. I'm looking for $1,500 per specialty. The other specialty is the technical rescue team. That would be below grade, confined space, high angle, anything, all of this property that we have in the community, the commercial industrial property, they have confined space issues where their primary rescue team. So a special technical rescue team is essential. I'm looking for $1,500 per team. The reality is that if we weren't on a regional effort, $6,000 a year just to keep the training for diver certification. So I would have to do $6,000 a year just to maintain diver certifications. I'd have to do $3,000 a year to do tech certifications. So split between the 6 towns, that's where we come up, with the $1,500. So we're all able to share in the burden of that training expense. This is a critical year for us because 3 years ago we started the dive team. Dive certifications are good for 3 years. This summer, 100% of the divers in the 6 communities, their cards are expiring. So, we have a class scheduled for the end of May, beginning of June, but we need to put a mechanism down the road that as a regional team, we're able to fund these things. It's great that we can do things regionally, but again, there is a cost. It's a reduced cost, but regional is not free. So, Mr. Chairman, those are the 2 areas within the budget that were not supported. And, again, I've had conversations with the manager and Mr. Kazanovich, and I understand, where we are financially. They know where I'm coming from. I know where they're coming from. But, from a priority standpoint, those are the 2 things that I'm looking for. So.
Okay, and Chief, underlining that anyways, this is not a new issue that you've been trying to address, and I respect the fact that you've come before us at least 2 years in a row with this specific problem and with really what appears to me is a creative solution to it. And honestly, anything more than 40%, you're going to start burning out your people anyway, so.
Exactly.
I would say you're probably at your limit there.
I would agree, and that's why I said, Mr. Chairman, I think it's a creative short-term solution, but it is
Right.
something that we're going to have to look at in future years.
Yep. Okay. While I have you, can you give me any kind of comments, because I think you were done talking about the fire side of things within the ambulance side of, I'll call it your business anyways. Any comments on that to add tonight?
Sure.
Just brief comments. I didn't mean to catch you by surprise.
No. I'm very rarely caught by surprise, Mr. Chairman. I just want to pass these out here. Just pass those down. I'll wait until everyone has theirs in front of them, Mr. Chairman.
Are they all the same?
Are they all the same, Steve?
They're all the same.
All the same?
There's probably more there than you need.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's what confused us. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the question, inevitably comes up every year regarding ambulance receipts and, you know, where we are in collections. I know that Mr. Kazanovich, several weeks ago, had provided a report to you that you had requested. I believe that was a year-to-date, you know, report. One of the things that I want to draw to your attention is sort of where we are in terms of ambulance revenue and some of the challenges that we've not only faced over the last couple of years, but we're going to continue to face down the road. The sheet that you have in front of you is an activity tracking report from Comstar Billing Company, which is the company that we contract with to do our ambulance billing. And this is for last fiscal year, July 1 of 11 to June 30, 12. And it's a breakdown of the total transports that the department did by insurance carrier. And the reason that I gave you this particular report is because one of the things that I want to draw your attention to is, let's jump down to Medicare, fourth line down. Medicare, by far, is the most popular insurance that we deal with in terms of the patients that we transport. And when you look over to the total charges on what we billed for Medicare patients, it was $533,626 and some change. And then when you go over to the next line, it gives you what the total allowable is from Medicare, which, as you can tell, is substantially less than what it is that we billed. It's $202,060. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, insurance is one of the few businesses where, you know, you can set your rates, or let me say the ambulance service is one of the few businesses where you can set your rates, you can send someone a bill, and the insurance companies look at you and say, well, you know, we know you think that's what it's worth, but this is what we think it's worth, and they pay you what they think it's worth, not you. So that is the norm when you look at all of these insurance carriers down the road. Our total charges that we bill, our actual allowable within the insurance company, is nowhere close. So we are billing out a little over $1.7 million in ambulance revenue, and we collected in FY13, or FY12, I'm sorry, $871,000. And, you know, it's a little more than that, because when you shake down the patients with no insurance, you know, it's a little over $900,000.
Do you have a budget for that shakedown part of your personal?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I think this is an important number because, you know, as you remember when we came into, and I know Mr. Kazanovich has explained this in the past, you know, ambulance billing is fluid. We are going to end this fiscal year still not have collecting things that we did 6 months ago. You know, calls get tied up in lawsuits. We are, you know, Captain Otteson, who heads our EMS division, is here. He gets lawyer requests, and we are seeing payments on calls that we maybe did 3 or 4 years ago that are just being settled, and insurance companies are paying on these things. So the ambulance portion, it's very fluid. So as you remember, when we came into town meeting last year, town meeting appropriated a sum to cover what we'll call a shortfall in the ambulance receipts. The problem with it is that I don't really view it as a shortfall, because it's a shortfall on an arbitrary number. The number was sort of made up. It was a projection a year prior as to what we think we're going to collect in ambulance receipts. So last year, it wound up being, the number was $25,000. We were $25,000 short. And I know it can, believe me, it gets confusing for me when we look at these kind of things. But the reason that I raise the issue is that I don't want people to look at the ambulance receipts or look at the program and say, well, what are we doing wrong? Because, you know, we're coming up short. Again, we're coming up short on an arbitrary number. None of us in this room have a crystal ball to know how many calls we're going to do, what's going to get tied up in litigation, what's going to get paid immediately, what's not. And we haven't even talked about what the rates are, or what insurance companies are going to do with their rates. So you'll see by looking at this paper, between the town meeting and June 30th, we actually exceeded what we had anticipated was going to come. So again, although people may be sitting in town meeting say, geez, we're $25,000 short, just that short distance between town meeting and June 30th, the collection went to $871,000. So one of the big problems, again, is what the insurance companies do. Over the last few years, we've seen a 7% reduction in Medicare. 2 days ago, on April 1st, Medicare had another cut by 2%. We're up to 9% as of 2 days ago on Medicare. Again, these are things that we can't forecast. You know, when Mr. Kazanovich and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, again with Captain Otteson, we were looking at this number in terms of, you know, not only, if you looked at the total charges, or even if you looked at the total allowable, over $1 million, if these cuts in Medicare, that really, you know, again, who can see these coming? We don't know what's going to happen. If these cuts in Medicare didn't come, you know, our collectibles would be well over $1 million if we didn't suffer those cuts from 2006. In 2006, 2007, Medicare increased their rates. 2008, 2009, they fell flat. 2010, 2011, 2012, they reduced their rates. So if we had held true to the Medicare rates of 06 and 07, our collections would be over $1 million. So, and the reason that I raise this is I want people to know that the system is not broken. You know, we're not doing anything wrong. You know, again, we can't predict call volume. We handle the call volume as it comes in. The other interesting number, when you look across on the totals line, if you look to the far right, percent collected, we have a 93.87 collection rate. That is unheard of. That is unheard of. Some of my fellow fire chiefs that I talk with on a daily basis, their collection rates are in the 70s, 80%. Okay, a 93% collection rate is unheard of. So we are doing very well in terms of the actual collection that we're receiving. We're writing very little off, and we are collecting. Unfortunately, we're not collecting what we think the service is worth. We're collecting what they feel it's worth. And this is not a problem unique to the town of Auburn or the Auburn Fire Department. Every fire department that is operating an ambulance across this state and country are dealing with the same problems that I'm talking to you about tonight.
Mm-hmm. And I can add to that. Back when I joined this finance committee back in the 90s, I was just coming off working in finance for a medical services company, and these numbers between total charges, allowable and collected, pretty normal. And this goes back to 1995, 1996. Not ambulance related, but that's the industry. There's mechanisms for why you're billing retail and you're getting paid, 40 to 70 cents on the dollar. Very normal. It's just the way that industry rolls, I guess. So none of these numbers surprise me, and I certainly know it'd be great to have, let's work with some real numbers. You don't always have that luxury.
Right.
Then it's just a matter of hopefully over time, your receivables are at least a manageable number. You can understand what's going on, to plan for going forward. So, yeah, I was just looking for an update on that. This is a lot more than actually I expected from you on that. And I believe, I see a number in here, ambulance proceeds offset of just over $4,000 on the budget.
Where are you seeing that, Mr. Chairman?
On the bottom of,
I believe
that.
I believe that 4,336 represents the 0.18% increase.
Okay,
There is no number for the
no
ambulance.
proceeds offset, okay. Well, that answers my question there. Okay. Appreciate the update on the ambulance. I'm going to open this up to questions now.
Sure.
Kim?
Chief, on your equipment repair line item, I noticed that it's 50 grand less recommended. Is that because 50,000 got transferred to the Public Works Department because of the fleet or building maintenance?
That is correct. $50,000 was transferred to the DPW because they are maintaining the fleet. So that balance of $25,000, that is for service contracts that, things that we have in the building, garage doors, HVAC, those kind of things. That represents a portion of that 25. And then the other 25 is for equipment repair of things that, essentially break, that would be outside the DPW's purview in the course of a year.
Getting to overtime, you had $124,000 appropriated this year.
Correct.
Do you know what your balance is right now, how much you have expended of that?
My balance is a little over $50,000. We've actually done pretty well in overtime this year. But I do anticipate that as we come into May and June, people are going to start using time, vacations, things like that. So, we'll use a portion of that. Usually any leftover overtime money as well goes towards offsetting a shortfall in the fire suppression line, which essentially funds the call firefighters. Typically, the amount that I'm budgeted every year, the $138,499, that only represents the part-time shifts. There is not a nickel for callback. I estimate that number to be $10,000 on an annual basis that I'm not budgeted for. So, usually anything that's left over in various line items, including overtime, that's usually, swept over to try to cover that shortfall. And I can tell you that shortfall is definitely there based on some of the storms and coverage and other types of activations. Fortunately, we didn't do we probably did about maybe less than a half a dozen, but it just seemed like every one that we did, it was a 24-hour, operating period. So there will be some shortfalls in that line.
So Chief, the overtime money you have, does any of the existing money go to keeping the 7 people that you want to have per shift, or is that all outside of that purview?
That's all outside. None of that overtime money goes towards maintaining 7 people, because I just wouldn't have enough. Based on obligations that we do in terms of training, the dive team trains every other month, the tech team trains every other month. I pay instructors to do the call firefighter training on Monday nights. Anything essentially overtime related, even not representative shift work, comes out of that overtime line. So if I were to try to maintain a 7-person minimum within the current budget, I would fall short in all of those other areas.
I have one more question for Eddie. I think in the package you gave us at the beginning of this whole process, there was a positive unappropriated balance of 7,000 something. Is that still a true number? 7,122?
That balance is now $9,515.20.
Is there any reason that you can see that we couldn't take 3,000 of that for the dues and meetings that the chief has asked for and made a good pitch for?
Well, I think when we presented the budget, we identified at the model or the parameters that we built into the budget, that after our recommendation, that was unobligated. Certainly, I would not oppose to that, but I thought it may be a little premature for any portion of that to be considered without hearing from all of the other departments that may come in. But that's a decision that the Finance Committee will have to make.
I'll defer to everybody else
Well,
to have questions.
Actually, no, Kim, you do bring up a good point where we are coming down to, we got half a dozen or less budgets left. And some of those we really don't have any choice on the numbers on them. You can see the list yourself on that. So you bring up a valid point, Ed. We're coming really to the end of the road in terms of our discretionary use of this. How do we get up to $9,000? Did we make our money grow in the last couple months? I thought we were under 7 on this. Because we pulled some off the library, right?
No, there was a typo on one of the budgets. There was an error, so.
This is conservative budgeting, I tell you what. So, to you, Ed, I think we're getting closer to the end of the cycle that I certainly have no problem in terms
I'd
of
make a motion to
applying.
amend the budget then, that line item, and boost it to 6,500. Whichever that line item was. I can't find it now.
5732-00.
It's under dues, is that the one under dues and meetings?
Dues and meetings, correct.
Dues and meetings on that.
Yeah. 5732.
Now, I know you had also said in terms of letting everyone else have a chance to speak on this, and we can hold that, or we can
All right,
take a
whatever you
second
wanna
on
do,
that. But
that's
we'll
fine.
come back to that.
All right.
And I'm not opposed to that at all. Let's just continue to open this up in terms of questions or discussion. Gentlemen, Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Chief, how many call firefighters do we have?
12.
12? And how many, did they cover like a per shift basis, 1 or 2? How does it work? How do you manage it?
There is, the budget calls for 1 call firefighter a day, essentially, and the day represents 19 hours out of the 24. So there's 1 shift from 8 a.m. to 5:30, and then there's a shift from 5:30 p.m. to 3 a.m., and that's 7 days a week.
Okay. And when I was looking at your billing receipts, just, I guess, I used to work for an insurance company. I'm not gonna say which one, but do you bill their supplemental policies? Is that, I know someone that says Medicare. I mean, what about their supplemental policies? I mean, that covers costs that overrun Medicare, correct?
Yes, the insurance companies go after every avenue that they can. So whatever Medicare covers, if there's other policies, they'll go after those other policies. Eventually, we get a list of balances that people have, and we have to make the decision as to whether or not we're going to send those to collections or we're going to write them off in terms of the ambulance billing.
So your billing processes, assuming they're a retiree or whatever it is, but you bill Medicare, and if they had a supplemental policy, like people do have, you then bill that policy?
Correct.
So that's, all right, that's,
For whatever the balance would be.
so when I read the Medicare piece, it's not necessarily the truth. There's probably another portion of this that's, the supplemental does cover over and above charges, correct?
Yes, but that would be captured in the other insurance, or it's possible that it's captured in the other insurance?
All right, so that's what that is, okay.
Yes.
All right, so the percentages aren't as, all right. That's my only question, thanks.
What's that, Chris? Okay. Any other questions? Mike, anything? Ed, Jim? Ann?
Yeah, a question about the ambulance. Out of all the ambulance, I don't know if you track this number, but out of all the services the ambulance provides, what percentage would you estimate is for Auburn residents?
It's a good question. I don't have that number off the top of my head, and I couldn't venture a guess. We respond to, approximately 300 motor vehicle accidents a year that wind up in personal injury. I couldn't even venture a guess. We could try to run some reports through our software to figure that out. A good percentage of the people that we do in motor vehicle accidents are not Auburn residents. We do a lot on the highways, 290, 395, the Mass Pike. Most of the people that we take out of the mall are not, so it's, I couldn't, there is certainly a percentage that we could try to find out. I couldn't even venture a guess.
I understand. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Chief, general question, not dollars, and then Kim, we will get back to that. Regarding mutual aid, I personally think someday we've got to add more to this budget anyways. But this fire department budget compared to area communities, especially those that support us, we support them. Do you have an opinion in terms of, hey, look, X town, north or south of us, we do a lot of mutual aid, et cetera, they are just not supporting their fire department budget as well as Auburn is, that kind of thing. Does that ever come up between fire chiefs in terms of,
I want to make sure that I understand your question correctly. Are you asking whether or not I have an issue with responding to a particular community frequently because they're not supporting their fire department?
I'm talking in generalities. If you think, hey, look, for instance, X town, which may be a smaller town, but if they're supporting their fire department budget 1/10 the way we're supporting ours, and that just doesn't make sense. We're constantly getting mutual aid calls from a particular town, and we'll keep it as generalities. Does that come up between fire chiefs?
It does, and I guess the real answer is that we benefit from mutual aid more than other communities benefit mutual aid from us. So I guess we would be sort of the offending community, if you will.
So we're the weak financial sister.
Well, and and I'll use the town of Oxford. Town of Oxford is a very close mutual aid partner with us, not only on the fire and the ambulance side. Oxford responds into the town of Auburn for fire and ambulance calls in the course of a year more than we respond to the town of Oxford. We, on average, turf away about 200 ambulance calls to mutual aid because we do not have the staffing or the personnel to deal with it. We own a third ambulance. The fire department owns 3 ambulances. We operate and staff 2. If we had staffing to put that third ambulance on the road, that's 200 more calls that we're capturing in terms of revenue and response. Yeah, we certainly receive more mutual aid than we give.
Okay, and I appreciate you keeping it generalities, and I guess kudos to Oxford in this case here. I'm only just setting that up because, I mean, if we're adding a huge amount of $3,000 to your budget, Finance Committee is supporting whatever we can do for you. If there aren't any further, Mike, go ahead.
I just have one question
Sure.
for Ed. If we have a third ambulance that we could be collecting fees on, obviously, we'd be losing money. You must have done the math on all that type of thing?
We've talked about this, and, certainly, I think the issues that the chief has raised relative to the reduction in revenue that's coming in from those ambulance calls would play into that as well.
Okay.
So what it would cost to maintain that third ambulance for 24/7.
Right.
I don't know what that cost would mean in terms of manpower, in terms of benefits, and what revenue that would generate, whether that would be neutral, whether that would require a subsidy from the general fund, or whether or not it would be, we'd have to do a cost analysis to see if that would be, it would cover 100% of the cost. I believe it wouldn't.
I would agree. I don't think that we're looking at a windfall here if we were to staff a third ambulance in terms of it's going to generate its own revenue. From my standpoint, looking at it purely from an operational standpoint, that's 200 calls a year that we're requested to go to that have an increased response time because we're waiting for a mutual aid ambulance from somewhere else. So I would support it from an operational standpoint, but I don't think in any way we're gonna have a windfall.
Now, once again, let's be clear, when the ambulance program started, we took it in-house from a third party. A lot of the reason why was the quality of service, flexibility, et cetera, from the third parties wasn't acceptable to the residents of the town. Former Chief Bellimer, and I know Ian was involved on the committees there. So it wasn't all dollars and cents. Now, our committee, yeah, for us it's dollars and cents, but there was a service side of this that you really can't put on black and white paper here to basically give a better service to the residents of Auburn in an emergency situation. So let's just be clear on that. Any other questions? All right, Kim, can you just give your amended
Yeah.
motion again?
I make a motion that we increase line item 5732, dues and meetings, from 3,500 to 6,500.
Second?
Okay, so we have a motion to increase that. Chris, comment? Question?
To you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
Ed, have we gotten a complete financial picture from what we're expecting for fiscal year 2014? Are you waiting for any other revised numbers like, pension and benefits? Have we gotten the full slate here? Is there anything else that could come in that could have a ripple effect on this budget?
The only budget that may change, As I see it, you're gonna finish up next week. Out of the 5 next week, the only one that may change is a result of the budget released by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is the Bay Path number.
And how does that impact? What's that impact? Do we know an impact at this point, or you don't know an impact?
I don't know an impact. Quite honestly, it could work in our favor. If they receive more state dollars than they're anticipating, then the available unobligated balance could go up, and it could work the other way.
This is to the committee. Do you think it makes sense to wait until we get those Bay Path numbers, to wait to decide to reopen the budgets? I mean, as you guys pointed out to me last week, we can reopen a budget at any time. It doesn't have to be tonight. Let's get our Bay Path numbers, get a complete understanding of where we are today, and then reopen it.
Here's the problem. You're not gonna know that number until late June.
Yeah, that is the problem. Right.
So then,
And we run into this just about every year. You know, sometimes we get numbers confirmed a little earlier rather than later. So I guess in summary, right now, we have a small surplus created by Ed that seems to be between $7,000 and $9,000, depending on the day of the week.
We can bring it back down to 7 if you want.
Well, you know, looks like we're working on it anyways. And your point's well taken, Chris. We've got an amended motion on it to adjust line item 5732 by $3,000. And we have a second on that. So unless we have any other comments, let's vote on that. Then we'll vote on the amended budget in total, unless there are any other questions. So we have motion second. Any other comments? This is on the amended line item 5732, increasing it by $3,000. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One opposed. Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, then we now have an amended budget before us, town manager recommended, of $2,435,257, which is an increase of $7,362 over prior year, and that is excluding the effect of one of the maintenance accounts adjusted for $50,000. So a net increase, you could argue, somewhere close to $57,000. Do I have a motion on that?
Motion.
Second.
Any questions, or, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One opposed, so voted. Chief, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a
Appreciate
good
your
evening.
time on this. Okay, that's all we have for budgets this evening. Our budgets next week, once again, I said the law budget, it's our legal budget. The Bay Path budget, Solid Waste, Youth Commission, pension and benefits, and maybe CIP if we have a chance to address it. Any other questions, comments? We'll be meeting next week. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Gotta go
Opposed?
fast.
So voted.